a certain point, we decided that the time machine should be built into a car. And we came up with this gag where the farmer would see the time machine and think it was a spaceship.
Looks like an airplane without wings.
That ain't no airplane. Look.
The cliche with a spaceship is a gull-wing door. And there was only one car that was cool that had a gull-wing door, and that was the DeLorean. So we thought it would be very hip and very cool if Doc Brown built his time machine in a DeLorean.
Are you telling me that you built a time machine out of a DeLorean?
The way I see it, if you're gonna build a time machine into a car, why not do it with some style?
So we first just turned this idea over to the art department and told the people, see what you can come up with. What would you do? I remember Andy Probert was the first guy that was hired in the art department to start trying to conceptualize this. And he came up with some very interesting designs, but Andy had a very strong science fiction background, and his designs were a little bit too slick. They were too machined, they were too perfect. And of course, Doc Brown was a guy that built this time machine in his garage. So we wanted something that looked a little bit more homemade, a little cruder, a little bit more dangerous, because parts would just be hanging off the back of it and so forth. So we turned to Ron Cobb. Ron had designed Conan, among other things, and he was somebody that we knew, and his style had a much more earthy quality to it. So we turned this over to Ron, and Ron came up with some very interesting ideas that we ended up using. I believe it was Ron that came up with the coils on the back of the machine, and the idea that there would be a nuclear reactor. That was very important, that the time machine was nuclear, so how would you put a nuclear reactor in a car? Of course, the nuclear facility 3 Mile Island was on everybody's mind back in the 80s, and we all know that those big giant cooling towers are necessary for a nuclear reactor. So the big nuclear cooling vents that are on the back of the DeLorean were an extension of that idea. My recollection is that Ron did it first, and he just had one, and we said, well, let's balance this thing, let's have two of them, and Andy came back and did what became the final design for the DeLorean. After Back to the Future came out, we got, of course, a lot of fan letters, and I think our favorite fan letter came from John DeLorean himself, and I'll read that letter to you. The letter's dated July 25th, 1985, addressed to Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale. Gentlemen, last week I had the opportunity to see a screening of Back to the Future in New York, and want you to know I think it was absolutely brilliant. I was particularly pleased that the DeLorean motor car was all but immortalized in the film, and want to thank all those responsible, Ron Cobb, Andy Probert, Mike Chaffee, and Kevin Pike, for the outstanding job they did in presenting the DMC as the vehicle of the future. They can join my soon-to-be-revived design team at any time. Thanks again for continuing my dream in such a positive fashion. Sincerely, John Z. DeLorean.